Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for attending the second virtual meeting of the BIG. As this is a large group and I want to be sure I respect your time, we will go ahead and get started right here promptly at 1. Again, this is the fall meeting of the BIG. We will review the agenda for the meeting in just a moment. Just to note, this meeting is being recorded. Andrea Tantillo, our virtual meeting coordinator, will take a few moments to ensure you're acquainted with Zoom so that you can feel this meeting will be productive. Take it away, Andrea.
Okay. Just like most meetings, the etiquette's pretty much the same. Please keep yourself on mute when you're not speaking. If you're not being a presenter, or you're not asking a question or making a motion, please make sure you turn your camera off when you're not presenting to save bandwidth. The way you can mute and unmute yourself on a PC or a Mac is there's a button that has a mute and a stop videos in your lower left-hand corner. You just click on that microphone or click on that video camera and that turns those on and off. If you want to chat, if you want to ask a question, or if you want to tell us something, you can click the chat. That's also down there on the toolbar, and that lets you type in your question. Next.
There it goes.
We would ask if you can, if your name is showing up something other than what your name is, if it's showing up as a phone number or some sort of employee number, or maybe your spouse or your kid's name, we ask if you could please change your name so that we would be able to see who is in this meeting. The way you do that is you click on the participants button at the bottom on your control panel, and that will open up the participants list. You can hover over your name on the right side and click more and then rename, then type in the name as you'd like for it to appear and then click OK. If you're having trouble with that, or if you're on the phone, we will be able to do that for you in a little bit. Next. If you want to raise your hand to get our attention, or before you want to chat, or if there's ever a moment when we ask for people to raise their hands, the way you access that is also on the participant panel. You click on participants at the bottom, it opens the participant list, and raise your hand is on the lower left-hand corner of the participant list. Your iPhone tools are very similar. The mute and unmute button are on the lower left-hand corner. To access the chat, on the right-hand corner is a more option with 3 dots, and click on that and it opens a menu for your chat. It is the same on Android and other devices, not just iPhone. That's just what I have, and that's why we use that example. And to rename yourself is the same way. You click on the participants and then you click on your name and then rename, then how you want your name to appear on Zoom, and then click done when you're done with that. Same way with raise your hands. The participants button would launch the list of participants, and then you click raise your hand on the lower left-hand corner.
Great, thank you, Andrea. Additionally, I want to note that for members of the BIG, we will hold votes in the negative. That means that if we have a motion to approve an item and a second, and following any discussions, I will ask if there are any whom wish to dissent. If there is none, then that motion will carry. For putting forth a motion, for doing a second or discussion, Andrea has placed everybody on mute. However, you will have the ability to unmute yourself, and just please monitor your time once finished to put yourself back on mute. That'll just help us keep control of the meeting and keep us moving forward. So let's review the agenda. I also want to note that I did provide the agenda packet to you, so you should have the agenda as well as the big roster, which we'll be talking about, as well as the summary for the June 2nd meeting, which we'll also be looking at. On the agenda, I did the call to order. We will be looking at introducing members of the BIG in just a minute as we go through the quorum certification process. Then we will be reviewing and approving, if possible, changes to the BIG roster, and then review and approve minutes from that June 2nd meeting. There will be an option for a public comment period to give those who are in attendance who would like to make a comment to members of the BIG regarding anything related to bacteria, I'll be welcome, and the big welcomes your input. Additionally, we have 5 items for this agenda today. One of those will be the I-Plan revision update, which I will provide. Item 2 is the 2020 annual report. We have a draft version before the big for their review and, if possible, approval today. The third item is a total maximum daily load program update I will provide based on communication with the TMDL program. Item 4 is the implementation project presentations. We have 3 presentations today. And then finally, if there's time, any other business that members of the big or those in attendance would like to bring before the big, we will join at that time to potentially talk about them. Again, we'll try to keep you on time and get us out of here by 3 o'clock. So again, to determine quorum, I will run through the member list. Again, you can unmute yourself. So when I call out your name, and I will do it as slowly as possible to allow you time to unmute yourself and note that you're present. If the member I call out is not present, if you are the alternate for that member, please also introduce yourself and note who you're representing. We'll try to do this as orderly as possible, and I'll begin with, and you do have the roster in your packet to look at as we go down the list. Representative Ernest Bales. Sarah Bernhardt from Bayou Preservation Association.
This is Sarah Bernhardt. I am present.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you. Ralph Calvino.
Present.
Thank you, Ralph. Jerry Karavitas. Anyone from Harris County Pollution Control?
Yes.
Anthony Tomlinson's here, and I saw Jerry earlier.
I'm present.
Okay, Jerry, gotcha.
Okay.
Thank you. Richard Chapin, I heard from you.
Yes, I'm here.
Danielle COC.
Hi, I'm here. Camila is also attending. I may need to step away at some point.
Great, thank you. And we will be getting a list of everybody who attended, so feel free to recognize that, and we'll make sure everybody's marked present. Charlotte Cisneros.
Hi, present.
Thank you, Charlotte. Christine Cooper.
Present.
Thank you, Christine. Tom Douglas.
Present.
Hi, Tom. Denise Ehrlich.
Present.
Thank you, Denise. Catherine Elliott.
Present.
Hi, Catherine.
Hello.
Teague Harris. Andrew Isbell. Carol Labreche.
I'm here, City of Houston.
Hi, Carol.
Hi.
Helen Lane. Michael Lee.
This is Tom Sample here on behalf of Mike Lee.
Okay, hi, Thomas. Mac Martin.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody.
Hi, Mac. Kathy McCoy. Jack Murphy.
I'm here.
Hi, Jack. Scott Nichols. Anybody from Montgomery County? All right, Becky Olive.
Stephen, I'm present. This is Karen Kotke.
Okay. Hi, Karen.
Hi.
Mitchell Page. All right, Linda Pahachek.
I'm here.
Hi, Linda. Rachel Powers. Patrick Reitmeyer.
Good afternoon. I'm present. I also have Death Tataki here as my alternate in case I have to step out.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Jim Robertson.
Good afternoon. I'm here.
Hi, Jim. Scott Singer.
I'm here.
Great. Thanks, Scott. Linda Sheed.
Here.
Hi, Linda.
Hi.
Brian Shemesky said he would be off today. Could not make it. Shane Simpson or Aaron Schindwolf.
Well, this is Aaron. I'm possibly the alternate now, but pending approval. But I think Shane is also on the phone. I thought I saw his number. Shane, are you there? Oh, so looks like he called in. I'm not sure what's going on. I see his number popped up, but
Okay.
we'll see.
All right.
Here somewhere.
Lee Tarrant. Michael Thornhill.
I'm here.
Great, Michael. Thank you. And then Scott Tuma. All right. I think we easily made quorum. Yes. All right. I appreciate your attendance today. And again, if I didn't call out your name, if you're an alternate or if you're just in attendance, the Zoom keeps a track of attendance, and we'll be able to make sure to register you here for the summary minutes. And again, thank you for attending. So up next is
Stephen,
Yes,
I'm
go
sorry
ahead.
to interrupt. There are two phone numbers that I don't know who is associated with it. And if we could just get names to go with, if your last four digits of your phone number are 7027.
7027 is Nina McPhee with AEI Engineering.
Thank you. And last four are 1440.
Aaron Schindwolf. I think that's the one that Shane Simpson was trying to call in on. I'm not sure what the issue is.
Okay, thank you.
And that first one was Nina McPhee. Is that correct?
Nina, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we made quorum. We will review changes to the big roster. Currently, I have San Jacinto River Authority. Aaron reached out to me to say that they'd like to change membership status. So Aaron would like to shift to the alternate position, and Shane Simpson would like to be the member representing business and industry for the San Jacinto River Authority. Are there any additional changes that members of the BIG would like to make at this time and put forward? All right, not hearing any at the moment. Is there anyone that would like to make a motion to approve, and we'll approve both of these changes at this time?
Jim Robertson, so moved.
Yeah, Tom Douglas, second.
All right, Jim, and then Tom. Any discussion? Not hearing any discussion. Are there any members that would be in dissent of this motion? Okay, not hearing any. This motion carries for these changes to the roster. Next up is the review and approval of the January 2nd big meeting. I'll give you a moment to review if you haven't had a chance to review the meeting summary. I will entertain any edits at this time. And a final last call for any edits. We'll at this time entertain any motion to approve.
Tom Douglas, move approval.
Richard Chapin, second.
All right, Tom and Richard, any discussion? Not hearing any discussion. Any member wish to dissent on this motion? All right, based on no dissents, the motion carries. All right, this time we are moving to a public comment period. If there are any members of the public who wish to make a comment before the big, please raise your hand. Or if you're on the phone, feel free to make your comment. Additionally, if you do not consider yourself a member of the public, but wish to make a comment or statement to the big, please raise your hand now or voice your comment before the big. Okay, not hearing any at this point in time. We will move on to the first item on our agenda. That is the I-Plan revision update. Feel free as both members of the big, as well as if you are a member in the audience, to ask questions again throughout the presentation today. Just be mindful that when you're finished asking the question to mute yourself again, just to help us move the presentation along and today's meeting along. So we have been discussing the I-Plan revision for a little while now, and we brought to several of our work groups in July some draft sections of the implementation plan for comments. So We did receive some comments at that time, and I will discuss those comments with you, some of those comments with you today, as well as go through some of the updated maps and data that will be used in the revision. Additionally, I will present a timeline to the BIG in terms of our plan to wrap up the revision and get the new version to the BIG for approval. So again, as I mentioned, 4 key work groups met in July to review applicable sections. The wastewater treatment facility and the sanitary sewer system, WWTF-SSS work group met in July, and we received post that meeting for 4 reviews. From the stormwater work group, which met in July as well, we received 2 reviews. The on-site sewage facility, septic tanks, and the illicit discharge work group met, and we received 5 reviews. And then the animal and agriculture work group met as well in July, and we had 1 review. So we'll still, just to let you know, be working on additional reviews to this process. And so we'll continue to join and engage in the process to see where we are at as we continue down the line of reviewing and revising the implementation plan. And I'll touch on some of what came out of those reviews as we go through the presentation today. Additionally, as I mentioned, part of this process is to update the implementation plan where we have maps or where we have data to bring it to current. And when I say current, we're looking at an endpoint of 2019. And where we have opportunities for comparison between 2013. And for those of you that may not be as familiar with the BIG, the implementation plan coming out of the TMDL process was completed in January of 2013. So that's kind of our start point to how we're doing. And so we want to start looking at comparisons between that start point and where we are today to look at how we might inflect change in the implementation plan to help direct us going forward for maybe the next 10 years. Additionally, when we looked at the implementation plan, we didn't have a focus on maybe the assessment level or assessment unit level or the segment level from a geographic focus. So the TMDLs themselves all come out of data that the Clean Rivers Program and TCEQ produce for the region, and that's at an assessment unit level. But oftentimes the geographic scope of information that we have available to us is not at that assessment unit level, and even sometimes not at the segment level. And so we want to start looking at how we get that data down to that assessment unit level. So as we look at each impairment, each assessment unit, we can really help define better what's going in that watershed, what's going in on that assessment unit that we might be able to address. And so we're trying to start moving in that direction. Additionally, we'd like to start looking at, and H-GAC is actually looking at for all of its data, how we can provide social and economic information to better address plan development as well as plan implementation. And so we're starting to look at that as well, and including that where we can and where appropriate in the implementation plan. So we're going to look at each of the sections that we have the lion's share of effort ongoing in working towards implementation. So we're looking at the wastewater treatment facility and the sanitary sewer system comments, some of the thoughts that came to when that group met in July. Wanted to make sure that we're addressing wipes in our focus, and so one of our activities focuses on fog education. Want to make sure we're including wipes within that. Considering this is probably something for the entire document, making sure that we standardize what we mean when we talk about bacteria, and so we're talking about indicator bacteria, and so we make sure that we're using that term throughout the document, not using multiple terms. Regarding monitoring frequency, that's the first activity under section 1, so it's 1.1. There's a suggestion to potentially remove that So the group's going to have to continue to discuss this one as to whether we remove it or potentially leave it in and adjust the language. The wastewater treatment facility workshops, should we make sure that we include CEUs going forward? So we typically have done workshops, at least at H-GAC, and we might have workshops targeting wastewater or sanitary sewer systems, but oftentimes we don't include CEUs. And so one question is, do we want to potentially make that part of our implementation plan, that future workshops try to include those in it? To try to address those operators and groups that might want to participate but would rather participate if we had CEUs. Is lift station alternative power a completed task? So one of the tasks within the wastewater treatment facility is dealing with lift stations, and primarily with providing alternative power so that they don't fail during storms and those kinds of things. Better explain geometric mean compliance versus grab max compliance. It'll come up on one of the tables that I present later today, so we'll talk about that in just a bit, how that's determined, but better make sure it's to better explain it in the implementation plan when we use that table. Clarify DMR submittal fact. So there's one point where we have DMRs listed in terms of the number that we receive, but it's different from the number of permits. And so why is that a factor? Why is that the case? So better explain that. Explain 20% not under stringent limit. So we have in the big project area, a tightening of the compliance limit for wastewater treatment facilities. It's not universal, but for most of the TMDLs in areas within the big project area, instead of 126, which is the standard permit limit, it's been halved to 63. However, when we look at all the plants in the big project area, not all are reporting under that limit. So why is that the case? And so I just need to make sure that's explained better in the implementation plan revision. And then frequency, add the number of wastewater treatment facilities. As a comment, you know, we could look at providing, when we look at the frequency in which these compliance samples are collected, we can actually determine based on the DMRs what plant is and what number of plants are at that current frequency to better understand how many plants are reporting at, say, a daily basis versus a monthly or versus a quarter basis. And so those are some of the comments we received to the current version of the revision. I am addressing these comments, and we'll be presenting those comments to members of the BIG in the coordination and policy this month. So just looking at some of the data, some of the things that changed. This is the wastewater treatment facility data for 2019. Number of permittees within the big project area, there's 636 based on TCEQ's outfall layer. The EPA registry has about 630. Some of the differences could be that there could be a new permit that TCEQ has approved that hasn't gone to the EPA's registry. So there could be a slight difference in these two numbers. We like to have that as a check to see if we're in the ballpark. Now, not all of those permits are for plants that are physically in place yet. So you have to have a permit before you can build. And so not all of those permits are going to be submitting DMR data to TCEQ. So about 540 are submitting, wastewater plants are submitting DMR data. And of those 540, 523 are providing bacteria data in their DMR reports, their discharge monitoring reports. And those 523 are broken down into 506 domestic and 17 industrial. We can use the data from the DMR to look at flow. And so one of the maps that we'll be including with the revision is this map here, just showing flow. And we can break down in terms of the number of plants that are at certain flow types. So from 0 to say 0.1 million gallons per day, there's 126 domestic plants and 10 industrial plants. I won't go through all the numbers, but just to let you know, One of the things that we've seen in difference between 2013 and 2019 is there are fewer 0 to 0.1 million gallon day plants, and a lot more of that has been spread out across the other flow regimes. And a lot of this has to do with growth, and as a plant size grows bigger to accommodate growth within the various areas that plant services. Additionally, we use that data from the DMR reports to evaluate compliance. And we say compliance, we're really just meaning, does that plant, how often does that number come back and is above the permit limit? Again, we're looking at 63 for a majority of plants, but it could be 126 for E. coli in terms of coliforming units per 100 milliliter. There are some plants that are also in our area that are using intercoxy, so 35 colony-forming units per 100 milliliter, just to let you know that. So looking at the geometric mean, so when plants take multiple samples and they can develop a geometric mean for bacteria, one of the compliance is to use a geometric mean as a factor for determining whether you're exceeding or not. So there are about in 2019, there were about 5,060 samples reported, test samples reported, and only 33 of those were found to be exceeding the limit. So less than 1% are exceeding. Otherwise, 99% or more are seen as in compliance. Daily maximum or grab sample is a different way for reporting your results. And so that's just going out, collecting a sample that day and reporting it. We have more samples and more wastewater plants reporting that. And so there's 5,160 test samples reported. Those exceeding were 164, and that gets you a little over 3% exceedance, or in this case, 96, almost 97% in compliance.
Yeah, question, was that on that last slide, was that, that's the 164 is the number of samples that exceeded the limit, or that's the number of different facilities?
So that's the number of reported samples that exceeded whatever their compliance, their permit limit was. And so if it was 126 or if it was 63 and they were above that, then they reported for that discharge monitoring report that they were above that limit.
So if it's Tom Douglas, if one facility had 5 different samples that were above the limit, would that show up, would that add 5 to the number, or would that just add 1 to the number because they were all from one facility?
So that would add 5 to the number.
Yeah. Okay,
and so
thanks.
You'll see that on the next slide where we can actually look at exceedance by plant size, and we can start looking at percentages or numbers that we have that we're exceeding. So this is a breakdown here on the left side, looking at the size of the plant, whether it's 0.1 to 0.5 million gallons per day, onto the larger 5 to 10 million gallons per day. There's several plants have variable or intermittent discharges, and those typically aren't used in the TMDL process. So we primarily look at these 5 categories here. And traditionally, when we're looking at the geometric mean, some of the larger plants, we don't typically see a problem with the geometric mean, but we do start seeing a little bit higher numbers when they just go out and collect a simple grab sample, a reportable number. We see the opposite typically in the case of the smaller plants.
Would it be possible to list those from the smallest to the largest? I find it easier to follow if you start with the smallest one and go to the largest one.
Yes, I can readjust that.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Tom. And then I mentioned that we can start looking at exceedances by plants in terms of looking at those that may have a little bit more difficulty versus those that are in compliance more often. So what we see on this map here, these dots are representative of an outfall. And again, the outfall is tied to a permit number, which is tied to that plant. So it's the easiest way to mark a plant on a map is to do that. We then look at the data that they provide in their discharge monitoring report, and we can look at how often that is out of compliance. And so then we can develop a map looking at where we might need to focus our intent going forward. And so this is, again, a new map that we can look at. Again, the period is all the data that was collected between 2013 and 2019. And this can help us with our geographic focus. We're going to be shifting into sanitary sewer overflow data. So we get this data from Region 12, TCQ Region 12 office. It's data that's reported by the permit holders to the TCQ based on whether they have an issue with a sanitary overflow and their requirements and all that. We won't go into all that in terms of how often that's done and whatnot.
Stephen,
yes.
we have a question in the chat, which I think actually belongs in the previous section.
Sure.
It's from Rachel Powers, and she wants to know, did you calculate how much bacteria is contributed by each size facility? For example, frequent discharges from a tiny plant might be less significant than a single exceedance from a larger facility.
Yes, we've done that, and we've done that in the past as well. It's a fairly easy thing to do. We can look at it based on their daily flow or average flow and multiply it times their permit limit, and that gives you an idea of how much bacteria would be allowable. And then we can also parse it out by their exceedance value. So if we, can take those days where, those situations where they may have been over the limit and look at it that way. But certainly when you put all that information together, either in terms of their flow, their daily flow times their standard limit, you do see that is the case, that obviously the larger plants have the greater capacity for bacteria. Again, not that they're releasing that amount. Usually they're well under their permit limit, but that is the possibility there.
She said thank you.
All right, so sanitary sewer overflow data. Again, we have numbers of sanitary sewer overflows that are reported, as well as an estimate made in terms of how much of that untreated effluent may have reached the environment, reached the water body, and we have those for 2011 to 2019. As you look on this table, there really is no trend in terms of we're shrinking the number of SSOs. It goes up and goes down. Likewise, when we look at estimated volume, there's not necessarily a trend, although we do pick up certainly storm events. Again, 2017, we had Harvey. That may be a large reason why we have 13,000 gallons released that year. Again, we're in thousands of gallons. So this is 13 million. Additionally, we can attach those SSO numbers, and this is 2013 to 2019, to their permit numbers, and then parse them out in terms of a map. And as one might guess, in areas where the development is potentially older, we often see the larger number of challenges related to infrastructure and potential for sanitary sewer overflows. As you move into areas of newer development, newer infrastructure, again, we don't see that. Of course, that's to be mindful of the idea that down the road, these areas currently aren't meeting the standard for contact recreation. Down the road, however, there might be new inputs from SSOs as this infrastructure gets older. And so one of the things we want to make sure be mindful of is to control that down the road. So some of the stormwater comments, again, we received a couple of reviews for this section, and One of the ideas was to combine the stormwater and the construction sections of the implementation into one. At least receive one comment to make sure we maintain those two as separate. So we'll be bringing that back to the group to verify what direction they'd like to go. There was a comment to add in addition to a lot of the current bacteria reduction methods, some of the additional thoughts were surrounding sedimentation, that is removal of bacteria by removing sediments from the water body, floatables, which potentially could carry bacteria, making sure you remove floatables from the water body, and vegetation, increasing the riparian and water-based vegetation and the potentiality of removing bacteria that way. Also facilitates sedimentation. Checking for consistency with terms, including the use of green infrastructure. If we want to make sure we add that in, back when the plan was developed first, LID was the nomenclature du jour, and we've shifted at least in using both LID and green infrastructure at the same time in recent years. For the circuit rider task found in the stormwater, there's one thought of shifting focus from a circuit rider that H-GAC would provide in terms of technical information, which again is carried out by consultants primarily, to a lot of the MS4s, the multiple municipal separate storm sewer system permit holders that are phase 2. To shifting that more towards a resource sharing focus that the big as a group would enjoin, whether it's workshops or those kinds of things, to share that information, things like LID and green infrastructure and that kind of thing. Consider changing model. So one of the activities talks about model low impact development, change that to more resource sharing. Again, we don't necessarily model and say, hey, this is the specific BMP to use and make that a suggestion. Rather, share resources, provide information, and let the phase 2 or phase 1, make the decision on where they want to go with that information. Add maintenance information. So we have some new information that's come online with regards to maintenance of BMPs, and so we can add that information into the document. Check for uses of shall, ensure, and will. Again, the plan itself is a plan that's mostly voluntary, so be careful in the use of those terms. One comment was to focus on the WISE awards. Again, we had in the document from 2013, try to develop an awards program for the big, as well as coordinate with other type award programs that are out there that look at addressing stormwater. And so we developed the WISE awards in recent years, and so maybe shift the focus to really expand on that award program. And then strengthen public reporting in the case of construction sites that need some additional maintenance. There's several, whether it's 311 or Galveston Bay Foundation's GBAN reporting tool, that are out there, and so making sure that is out there for public understanding, as well as let the public know what is a reportable need for whether it's SSOs or it's construction site or whatever, trying to encourage the use. So under stormwater, we have several new maps and mapping approaches. This one is looking at urbanized areas that would be recommended for stormwater permits. So the data that's behind this is the urbanized area from the Census Bureau. So this is 2010 information. We have obviously going to be getting a new urbanized area based on the 2020 census. So this would have to be updated. TCQ typically uses the urbanized area for its TMDLs. I do recognize, however, that phase 1 permits may not necessarily fit this this data set. In the case of Harris County chose to put all of Harris County under its phase 1 permit. And so one of the things we'll be doing is adjusting the map to have a permitted area So there'd be a separate map looking at just those that would be under a stormwater permit. So we'll be combining this data set with the phase 1 permitted areas as well. Just to let you know, based on this map, 42% of the project area would be under a permit, phase 2 permit at least. But again, if we added in Harris County, it would change that number and would certainly go up. We are adding land cover into the document this year. So we'll have information related to developed areas, areas that are forested, areas that are pasture and the like. Just looking at developed areas, again, this is for, this is 2018 data. So a study that we did in 2018, about 45% of the watershed or the project area is in a development category, whether it's high, medium, or low density development. Looking at population, we have population estimates for 2019. We actually have them for 2015 as well. If you look at 2015's population, about 4.9 million to 5 million in terms of population in the project area. Looking at 2019, that had grown to about 5.4 million in the project area. And taking that estimate all the way out to 2050, we're looking at about 7.9 million in our project area. And again, we can also, our economic data group can look at population density current and where that population density is going. And obviously a lot of it's going west and north into either Fort Bend and Waller County or into Montgomery County. And so this will be new for our implementation plan.
Stephen, we have a question in the chat.
Sure.
It was Camilla Biaggi. She wants to know why isn't Harris County included in the count?
In terms of the permitted area. So that was, again, we wanted to look at phase 2 permits. And so those are based off of the urbanized area that's from the census. And that's how TCQ traditionally does it. For the final product in terms of the implementation plan, we're probably going to be using that information along with phase 1 permitted area to develop a permitted stormwater map. And so it's going to be expanded to include Harris County, knowing that Harris County is all under a phase 1 permit.
Hey, and Steve, just to clarify, this is Danielle COC. Most of Harris County, so there are some phase 1 entities that are not in our permit.
Right, and then Pasadena, that's true. Thank you, Danielle. And just to let you know, Pasadena, for those that are on, Pasadena is a phase 1 as well, and Pasadena is in Almond Bayou, which is part of the big project area. So Pasadena's area will also be included.
I think the Port of Houston is also a phase 1.
Right, and I think, unless I'm wrong, I think currently the Port of Houston's not in our project area.
Oh yeah, that's right.
But yes, they are phase 1. You're correct. Also, our economic group can, and again, a lot of it's based on where those population projections are going and the amount of development that likely comes with that population growth. We can identify a development pressure. And again, this is areas where we would expect future wastewater plants, where we would expect future residential and commercial development. So these are areas where we potentially want to encourage investment in best management practices to prevent future degradation in areas that are already currently impaired for fecal bacteria. We don't want it to get worse. So opportunities to maybe get out in front. Finally, at H-GAC, we also are trying to track the number of low impact development, LID, and green infrastructure projects that have been put on the ground already. Some of which have some monitoring data, majority of which do not. And we've been able to determine about 70 projects can be found in our project area. And they reflect 6 different categories: residential development, non-residential use, mixed use, open space, street improvement, and a category of unknown. And so the unknown we just have to follow up on, try to figure out what that is. So we're going to use that again. The website's a toolbox, and there's I'll provide a link in the future just so that you have an ability to get to that. I'll put that in the chat here. I'll get you that and put it in the chat in a moment. So we have the ability to track these projects and are getting those in from from those that are putting them in place. And again, it's a resource tool that can be used by those that are implementing the implementation plan. On-site sewage facilities, oftentimes colloquially called septic systems, and the illicit discharge work group met. We received 5 reviews to this section. One of the things that is of note, we'll be adding motor waste to the illicit discharge section of the document. That's activity 6 or strategy 6. We took on motor waste because we expanded the project area to include Jarbo Bayou, which is a small watershed that empties into Clear Lake. And they have, it's tidally influenced, and boaters are obviously a central figure in Clear Lake. And so the potential for boater waste impacting and providing fecal bacteria to that watershed certainly is a possibility. One comment requested clarity regarding the 36% of the project area. So we looked at service area boundaries, and those are boundaries for wastewater treatment facilities, and arrived at about 64% of the watershed project area has a service area boundary. That means that there's likely some wastewater service provided to that part of the project area. That leaves about 36% of the project area outside of a service area boundary, and likely an area where on-site sewage facility is in use. That's not necessarily to say that in a service area boundary you won't find OSSS, which we certainly do find that in an area that even has a service area boundary and potentially a wastewater treatment facility. So I have to clarify that section. Rewrite activity 3.3.2, biennial review by TCEQ. So one of the things we have determined is that in the implementation plan, several of the activities had TCEQ implementing on behalf of the BIG. And so one of the things the BIG wanted us to do was look at how we would revise those actions or activities that are reliant on TCEQ to be more focused on what the BIG will be doing. And so we'll be looking at that one and some of the other ones to make sure that we revise it in such a way that makes sense for us.
Steve, we have a question in the chat. I think it was for the previous bullet point. Sure. And it was Danielle COC asked, by service area boundary, do you mean CCN?
So I need to know what that CCN, that doesn't ring a bell, Danielle.
Certificate of convenience and necessity.
Okay. I'll have to jot that down because that's something that certainly we'll have to look at what went into our service area boundary. Thank you. So the short answer is I don't know. And I'll have to look at that. Another comment came in concerning alternatives to waste hauler fleet tracking activity. So that was one activity that we've had a challenge in terms of finding a community that would like to be a pilot project for fleet tracking. And so when we look at waste haulers, whether it's a grease hauler or it's a fecal waste hauler in terms of on-site sewage facilities and those kinds of things, a community that would like to cradle to grave and have a pilot project to track it. Most cities, particularly the city of Houston and others have mentioned, they do have a cradle to grave process in place. And so there's a question we should maybe look at other alternatives to this action and activity. And so we'll be looking at that. Do more in terms of our outreach to on-site sewage facility installers. We have several, whether it's Harris County, H-GAC, and others that do outreach to installers, but maybe increase that or enhance that in our implementation plan, making that more of a focus. Additionally, context with regards to on-site sewage facilities and those with permits. So, and we'll look at a map here in a minute, making sure that it's fully and contextualized with relation to how on-site sewage facilities are identified, whether they're permitted or are those that are without permit, and how our process H-GAC does in terms of determining those numbers. So making sure that there's context and factual information there. And then finally add airline improvement district to our implementation plan, or at least in terms of our discussion about work that's being carried out by our partners to address on-site sewage facilities, including those that are failing. I don't know if this helps the comment that was made about the service area boundaries. Again, I'll have to get with you if you want to talk offline about it. We get the service area boundaries from TCQ, and there's a data layer that we get that goes into this. And so we can look at the area that's under service area boundary and those areas that are outside. And as I mentioned, about 64% of our project area is under a service area boundary. And I need a note, there are a couple areas that we have difficulty with our information. One, they're not within the H-GAC planning region, so we traditionally don't get information from them. The 13 counties in H-GAC's area, service area. In addition, these counties go to different regional planning organizations. And it'll become really pronounced on this next slide. So the permitted on-site sewage facilities that are found, including those that in that 36% of area outside of the service area boundary, clearly there probably are some overlaps. As I mentioned, there probably are some on-site sewage facilities found in those boundaries that have wastewater service. Additionally, Grimes and San Jacinto counties, we don't have data currently. We're still trying to find a way or method to get that information. And we've certainly reached out to the authorized agents in those two counties to try to get information in. Some of the impediments have been those that may have paper documents, not necessarily permits in electronic form, and the challenge of getting that information put into an electronic database. This map shows dots. Again, they're enlarged, so not necessarily respective of scale. There are 49,856 permitted systems. Again, we work with the authorized agents to determine what systems have come in that are permitted. In addition, looking at those areas outside of the service area boundaries, and those areas where we have parcel data that tell us that there is a resident there or there's a commercial property or whatnot, and the expectation that there probably needs to be some sort of wastewater treatment system in place, gives us an estimate of about 104,000 unpermitted systems out there. If we put that 104 with the previous slide number, we get an estimate of about 154,000 systems in the project area. And one of the things we'll be using is looking at potentially how many of those might be failing. There's been some studies that get anywhere from 12% to over 20% failing. So if you start looking at that number, you start thinking about roughly an average of 10,000 to fix a on-site sewage facility. We're starting to look at about 300 million to address all of those systems if we could do that. And finally, shifting into animals and agriculture, we had one comment reviewer that provided comments to the review of this section. Again, some clarity issues, in this case related to the addition of forest lands. So as we added the East and West Fork of the Sanderson River, particularly the East Fork, we picked up a lot of productive silviculture lands. And so the main thing is to be consistency related to the terminology of forestry versus forest land versus silviculture, which one that we use. Additionally, as we brought on the Texas Forest Service to be a participant in this process, it not only addresses these rural forests, but also the urban forest. And so we'll be bringing information related to that into the implementation plan as practices to improve water quality in the watershed. And then there was a note to add or consider the additional mid and long-term cost savings by erosion control, nutrients, and reduction. There's a statement in the section that related to this, saying that in the initial effort to address erosion control, nutrient reduction, and livestock management, there may not be a return on investment. But if you look at it as a midterm or long-term effort, you probably would see some savings. And so that was a comment that was made. Again, you saw the slide before. We are looking at the land cover in terms of data availability and how much of our project area is in grassland and pasture. We have about 18% of the land is available that is potentially under grassland or pasture. Cultivated crops, a lot less of that is available out there. About 1% of a project area is considered cultivated cropland. So those are some of the highlights of things that will be changing in the implementation plan. Again, a lot of it is data heavy, but again, we're updating a lot of those maps and data that's the foundation of the implementation plan. So what's our timeline going forward? I'll be putting the rest of the puzzle pieces together and bringing that to the coordination policy in mid-December. Then we'll bring it to the big in a virtual conference meeting in late January to have a first reading, an opportunity to look at the entire document and to get additional comments back from the big. Now, just to let most folks who may not be aware of it, the coordination and policy is made up of our big members and alternates. And so even though it may be looking like we're going to two different groups, they're really a combination of the same folks. And so as we bring out either parts of the report or document to coordination and policy, it'll also be going to the entire big as we go through this. And then in February, we'll come back in the coordination and policy and look at any items that have changed or comments that were made to try to address those in February. And then finally in March, bring a final reading of the document with the goal to either approve in March or at least bring it to the table at the May spring meeting, that report, the implementation plan revision for approval. And we're about wrapped up on the implementation plan revision. Any comments or questions?
Steve, Brian and Todd from H-GAC both commented on the CCN if they wanted to.
Sure, Todd or Brian, if you want to enlighten me, something I must have missed.
Yeah, so generally when utility district or a MUD or something is established, the first thing they do if they're going to provide water or sewer service is apply for a certificate of convenience and necessity. So they'll have that. Not all districts are required to have one. Municipalities and some districts are not required. So basically all of the folks that have wastewater permits or water permits, when we map those, you're going to have a combination of all of those that have the CCN, and then there's going to be some that are included that do not have one because they're not required to. So long story short, and Brian can correct me if I've got something wrong, but everybody that has a CCN number, if they're providing sewer service, should be included in those maps.
Okay, thank you, Todd, for the clarity. Any other comments before we shift to the annual report?
I have one. This is Linda.
Hi, Linda.
At the last coordination and policy meeting, you talked about doing an analysis of the very small wastewater treatment plants and looking at the geometric mean. And on the second slide, the slide that Tom Douglas commented on of putting the flows in order, on that slide where you were breaking out the plant flow and the size of the plant and the geometric mean, the smaller plants had a much larger geometric mean than the other ranges. And I'm just curious, did anything come out of that evaluation, or is this much bigger where it's several times larger than the larger plants, the smaller plants geometric mean?
Let's just pull that up. Is it this one?
No, yeah, okay, well, it's like 0.3 and then 1.6. I mean, it's 1.6 significantly larger than, I was just wondering, because you had talked about doing an analysis or in-house analysis, your folks. So I was just curious, did this show anything, and is there anything about the smaller plants and the analysis that you said you conducted regarding geometric means that's going to be added to the I-plan?
So short answer, no, we haven't done the study yet. But
oh, okay, so that was future, okay.
Right, I have that noted again to make sure that we look at that and try to determine why it's such a little bit larger number. So how many of those plants are reporting in this category? Again, there's 157. So how many of those are the ones that are contributing to that 1.6? You know, maybe it's just a couple, or maybe it's a bunch of them. So we can do that.
Steven.
I'll note that. Go ahead.
Part of it too is just simple mathematics based upon the number of samples, because a plant that's 0.1 MGD, they're only required to take an E. coli sample, you know, maybe once a week, sometimes once a month,
or even once a quarter.
Yeah, so their sample is only going to be that one sample, whereas you know, a 5 MGD, 10 MGD plant would have to be required to take daily samples.
Right.
So you're,
yeah,
a lot of it's just in the calculation. A 1.6 geo mean isn't very high.
Okay.
But again, it's based upon, are you looking at one sample? Or are you looking at 22 samples when you're doing the math?
Yeah, I understand. Okay, thank you.
All right, let's delve into the annual report. All right, item 2. So in the 2020 annual report, we have brought the annual report draft to the coordination policy back in October and gave you a first look at that. In November, we also came back together to look at the 2020 annual report to receive any additional comments and to review those comments that were received prior. So for those that aren't familiar with the reporting process, the 2020 annual report covers the calendar year, essentially, in this case, December 1st, 2019 to December 31st of 2019. In the document, and you'll see 3 success stories. Those success stories focused on urban forests. Again, we're adding forestry practices to the implementation plan, and so it looked at an opportunity to show what the Texas Forest Service is doing, not just for forest lands up in the East Fork, but really in the urban core, City of Houston as a partner and the like. So when you read that, the success story, you'll see what the Forest Service is doing with our partners. The City of Houston sanitary sewer overflow tracking back in the spring meeting, if you read it in the summary, the City of Houston started a new tracking program, Infor, which is the program name, to track their sanitary sewer overflows from the beginning in terms of resources needed to address the overflow, to what took place to actually fix the overflow, to again reporting on the overflow, and to simplify the process but get more usable data from it. And so that's in here. And then boater waste, again, the second item that we've added to the implementation plan since the project area grew. Thought it'd be a great opportunity to highlight what the foundation, Galveston Bay Foundation, is doing currently to address boater wastes. When you see the implementation plan revision, you'll note that we really are going to be relying on what the foundation's already doing and how we could best support but stay out of the way of what they're doing. And so there's an opportunity to look at what they're doing. Additionally, the 3 big ideas hasn't really changed. Again, we're focused on reduce or eliminate sanitary sewer overflows throughout the project area, address failing on-site sewage facilities when and where possible, and then reduce peak stormwater runoff through lid or green infrastructure, trying to encourage and enhance that effort by our partners and those developers out there. You'll also see implementation progress, and we'll look at that in terms of how we're doing. Again, starting out in 2012, we had some implementation started, and then moving forward to where we're either in effect implementing most of the measures or have identified measures that we are really is out of the BIG's control to implement. So those are initiated but are in tracking to eventually be changed when we revise the implementation plan. So there are essentially 6 activities that are reported as completed. 32 are in progress in some form or fashion, and then 6 of those activities and 5 that are in progress are used in tracking. Again, as I mentioned, some of those in tracking really are just ones that we found are out of the BIG's control to try to address, but we're trying to find a solution in this case, probably revising the implementation plan to find a better action or activity to address that concern.
Steve, Tom Douglas has a comment in the chat about boaters.
Sure. Go ahead, Tom.
Oh, I just put it in the chat. You talked about boater waste and Clear Lake. And I recall in previous meetings, I believe Glenda Calloway brought up the lowest reach of Spring Creek near Lake Houston, that may be an issue that needs attention there too.
Right. I think it's good to note. I think that's something that when we look at the implementation plan, we probably want to also note that at least that arm of Lake Houston that goes up in the San Jacinto River is a potential area for where there might be some liveaboards. Probably not to the extent of Galveston Bay or Clear Lake, but certainly that's a potential possibility. So in the annual report, you've seen this before. Again, we have the bacteria trends listed out here. Going from the top down, this is the original big project area, those 72 assessment units that were found to be impaired for indicator bacteria. When we expanded the area to include Almond Bayou, East and West Fork, and Jarbo Bayou, that brought the trend line down a bit, but it still essentially follows the same pattern. We did maybe got some of the early hanging fruit, and now we're sitting at a fairly consistent flat level trend where we maybe need to try to figure out what's next for us. And that's kind of the impetus for looking at the implementation plan and what our next steps are. Additionally, you'll find, in case of Jarbo Bayou, trend for fecal bacteria, Armand Bayou's trend for fecal bacteria on this map, or on this graph, and then finally the East and West Forks trend on this graph. Because we have both E. coli and Enterococci, we divide that standard by itself, and so then you get a 1 for the standard. And then this final trend is for areas of the Clean Rivers program that are outside of the big project area. So we've actually seen that come up to be sitting at right at the standard, just of note. So I wanted to bring up the annual report just to walk through it real quick for folks. Again, you had the link for this, and hopefully you've had a chance to take some time to look at it. So again, we have the 33 members of the BIG, our alternates that have been identified. You'll find a general executive summary. Nothing much has changed in terms of that version of the document. The project area still remains the same, including all, I mentioned Jarbo Bayou down here. Here's that graph that's simplified, just looking at the expanded and the original and expanded project areas. The success stories I mentioned, urban forests, City of Houston, boater wastes, and then the progress report, including our 3 big ideas. And a little discussion section on implementation in 2019. The main part of the annual report is the implementation progress table. And each of the strategies is listed on the left-hand side. We have each of the activities for each of the strategies listed. In the case of this first one, it's impose more rigorous bacteria monitoring requirements. Again, this is tied to frequency of monitoring. It was mentioned that this is something that TCEQ always has been mentioned in the past. This is something that TCEQ would have to do in terms of changing permits. And it was something that TCEQ is not interested in necessarily blanketing the entire project area with. And so, we initiated it, but we placed it in tracking because it's an issue where we know it's not going to change, and we need the BIG needs to revise the implementation plan to make 1.1 a measure that we feel the BIG has control over. 1.2, impose stricter bacteria limits. This is one we've listed as completed. Essentially, majority of, if not all of the bacteria limits for wastewater treatment facilities have been updated to either the stringent limit of 63 or are in areas where it's going to be maintained at 126. And so those permits would have been changed during this past 8-year period of which we started looking at this. And so it's been felt this has probably been completed and it's in tracking. From this term, probably not revise the implementation plan for this activity, but rather keep it and use it as tracking, because it's, again, something that we'd like to see how things are going with that. Again, I'm not going to go through all of these, just wanted to at least show how progress is reported and status is reported. 1.3, increased compliance and enforcement by TCEQ. Again, this is something that is traditionally, when we look at TCQ, something that's out of our hands in terms of their increasing compliance and enforcement. However, we've used Harris County pollution control information to track compliance efforts from an independent standpoint, to look at both the self-reported stuff from wastewater treatment facilities, but as well as an independent look at it from Harris County Pollution Control. And so we've marked this as in progress and on schedule, at least in terms of being able to report on compliance efforts. I don't know if there's anything that the group would like to highlight or look at this point. I wanted to open it up to the big to have discussion on the annual report and where they feel the report is at. If there's any questions you have or thoughts on the report, please make those at this point. Andrea, do we have anything in the chat?
We do not, and there are no hands raised.
Okay. At this time, I would entertain any motion to approve the annual report.
I'm sorry, Stephen. I have a couple of comments.
Okay.
That were kind of editorial, like on page 12, where you show the implementation progress figure 8.
Yes.
The very last sentence, I don't know if you want to say the big has or the big will. I mean, that may be okay. I don't know. But on page 7, you talk about the I-tree hydro model.
Yes.
And I was thinking, I'm assuming that's a Texas Forestry Service model. But it would be nice if you could put the URL in there so that we could look at it and see what the applications are for using that model, and to make sure it's using canopy rainfall data from our area instead of British Columbia. And then there was one other comment. Page 9. Right where you introduced the I-plan, you say the big is revising the I-plan and the process will be wrapped up in 2020. I think you'll need to change that to 2021, given the schedule that you laid out into next March and into perhaps the next meeting.
Okay.
And that's it. I just wanted to hear your whole report before I made my comments.
Okay. I don't think that'll be a problem adding a link for the model. Mac, are you on still?
Yep, Stephen, I'm here, and I can provide that link to you as well. Curious, Lynn, did you want the actual data that I had regarding that watershed protection plan, or did you want just like a link to the model itself?
Just a link to the model so I can read about the model and see how it's used. Is it open? Is it something that we can download, or is it strictly for your use? Or
yeah, it's free to download. It was developed by the United States Forest Service and a couple other partners with them, but it's got a heck of a learning curve with ArcGIS and ArcMap, so it just saves a lot of people time for myself to do it.
All right. So it's based on ArcGIS. Okay, thanks.
No problem.
Steve, Sarah Bernhardt has some small edits in table 1, some typos.
Okay. Go ahead, Sarah.
Hey, Stephen, and I apologize for getting these too late. Under strategy 1.3, it says yes. WWTF DMR report, and DMR, I think it should, I'm not sure, but it might need to say DMR's report or DMR's indicate. it just seems odd to say report, but I could be wrong.
I would say DMR's report is.
Yeah, it's just not pluralized there. That was a tiny.
Okay. Any others?
6.1. Page 21.
There we go.
And just under the second paragraph, last sentence, the project got underway in 2020. That's very small. And the last sentence in the second paragraph.
You want to say the project got underway?
Yeah.
You could do that.
And 9.3, under the achievement, just the font and size don't match the rest of the document.
All right. BD. And is that it?
11.1. Same edit in the second. This is the third paragraph.
Yeah, I see it.
Last sentence, project got underway in 2020.
Right.
And then on page 26, under the acknowledgements,
Yes.
I think Jason Leifester, I think there shouldn't be a space, but I could be wrong in his surname.
Yeah. Got it. Thanks.
And I think that was it. So thank you.
Okay. Any others?
Yes, Stephen. This is Ralph. On the acknowledgements as well, behind my name, you need to change AECOM to Terracon.
Ah.
It's updated elsewhere, everywhere else, but that one location keeps showing up.
All right. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Any others? All right, so with those editorial changes, and I will place a footnote once I receive a link for the model to give you a web page for, or a link to the model. Is there any outstanding comments or edits?
Stephen, this is Andrea. I just want to let you know that Mac Martin did post the link in the chat, and I captured it and will give it to you after this meeting.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's hard for me to do the presentation and see the chat box. Okay, does anyone want to entertain a motion to approve?
Motion.
Who was that?
Ralph Calvino.
Hi, Ralph. All right. Any second?
I'll second. This is Charlotte.
Who was that? Charlotte?
Charlotte, yeah.
Okay. And any discussion? All right. Again, if there are any of those of you that wish to disavow or disapprove of the motion, please let me know at this time. Okay, not hearing any. With those editorial changes, the motion carries to approve the annual report. And we will move on to the next part of the agenda. So next part is item 3, TMDL program updates. So Jason Leifester with the TMDL program at TCQ. Just wanted to let folks know of a couple of items. Essentially, Walnut Creek TMDL, past 2 meetings, Tier from Stevensville, Tarleton State had come to present on Walnut Creek's TMDL effort. To produce a TMDL, and so that TMDL is ready to go as an addendum to the TCQ's Water Quality Management Plan update, which goes to the EPA for approval. But prior to that, there's an open public comment period that started on November 6th and runs to December 9th. So there's still a little bit of time for those interested to review the TMDL and make any comments you wish to make regarding Walnut Creek. Additionally, the technical support document for Walnut Creek is on the TMDL website for you to review as background information for that TMDL. There are 2 other projects in our project area that are undergoing the TMDL process. So the technical support documents are currently available on the TMDL website for Harris County Flood Control Ditch D, which Tarleton State came and presented to us in the spring, and Horsepen Creek, which again was presented to us in the spring. So just want to make you aware that those are on the website if you're interested in either of those 2 projects. Eventually it'll get into the TMDL will be finished and go into the Water Quality Management Plan update. For those not familiar with the process, essentially we have about 227 assessment units in our project area. Of those, about 120 or so are impaired for fecal bacteria for impacting contact recreation. So there's still some assessment units that are not considered impaired. It could be because they aren't impaired based on data, but it also could be because there's insufficient data at the time to make a determination of whether they were impaired. So they're just left as not impaired for contact recreation. As new data comes in, potentially for that assessment unit, it might be considered impaired and listed, or those assessment units that do have data, new data might come in and cause them to be considered for contact recreation impairment. And so then that process starts for developing a TMDL. And again, a TMDL is based on the assessment unit level data. So as we are marching forward and trying to improve water quality throughout the region, there's still some assessment units that we see become impaired. We did have a couple in 2016, 2 assessment units that came off the impairment list. So we're working towards it, but it's just part of the process. Any questions on the TMDL update? All right. We will move into item 4, implementation project presentations. On your agendas, as well as here, we will have 3 presentations, one from Sarah Robinson with the City of Houston on Protect Our Pipes, which is the infographic you see here on the left-hand side. And then Kendall Guidros from H-GAC will do we'll cover a BPA H-GAC project surveying bayous in our project area. And then Jesse Casillas with H-GAC will also do a similar based project that's being carried out with funding from our Clean Rivers program, CRP funding, to address urban, suburban, and rural waterways in the H-GAC service area. So a couple in our project area, but then some outside of our project area. I will let Sarah take it away from here.
Okay. Can you guys hear me and see the screen that I am sharing?
Yes.
Okay. For some reason, my video is not wanting to turn on. But if you guys can hear me and see the screen, that is the most important part. So we will go ahead and get started. First, I just wanted to say thank you, Stephen, for the opportunity to share our new program with the BIG. As Stephen mentioned, I'm Sarah Robinson with Houston Public Works, and I am here to share our new sanitary sewer overflow prevention outreach campaign called Protect Our Pipes. So Protect Our Pipes replaces our previous Corral the Grease campaign and was redeveloped to better match the personality of Houston and incorporate rags and wipes into our campaign itself, and then also update our program's branding and messaging to meet current best management practices. So we officially launched this new Protect Our Pipes campaign just a couple of weeks ago on November 11th, just in time for the Thanksgiving holiday. Typically, we see sewer overflows caused from grease and wipes almost double this time of year, and a lot of that is due to increased cooking in the house and then also more guests staying in one home as well. And we are launching this campaign in tandem with Houston Public Works' overall sewer overflow response, which includes ongoing SSO tracking through the Infor system that we learned, that Stephen mentioned earlier, and we learned about at the last meeting, but also through infrastructure updates, ongoing maintenance and repair, and other similar updates. And you'll see throughout my presentation a couple of poll questions. If you just want to add any answers or ideas you might have in the comments, this is really just an opportunity for us to get some input and feedback from all of you as well. So the first question is, have you seen the Protect Our Pipes campaign yet? And if yes, then where have you seen it? So I'll be quickly going over some of the campaign materials itself, and then I'll also go over some of what we've done to launch the campaign to date. So our primary method for sharing this information is through our website, protectourpipes.org. If you have not visited it yet, I very much encourage you to do so. We've also created a lot of different print collateral as well as some digital pieces to help with outreach. One of the items that we do for outreach is we send out this postcard, which you see here, to homeowners who have recently experienced a public sewer overflow. So if a sewer overflow occurs on the city's main line, we'll send it to all single family homes within a 500-foot radius of that sewer overflow. If it occurs on a lateral, then we'll just send it to that one home that's connected to that lateral. We also provide our field staff with educational materials to help educate homeowners when they're responding to sewer overflows themselves. So this is a trifold brochure. The front is in English and the back is in Spanish. And all of our field staff are equipped with these to hand out to homeowners as they are working with them to clear up sewer overflows. In addition, we've also done a lot of outreach through our social media. This is through the Houston Public Works social media. You can see some of the graphics that we have developed here. If you have not gone to the Houston Public Works Facebook or Twitter page, I do encourage you to follow us and share these posts. It's really one of the easiest ways that we can get this message out to a wide branch of the community. We typically post these on Wednesdays as a part of our Water Wednesday series. And you'll see one that we just posted last week right before Thanksgiving, as well as several recent posts related to Protect Our Pipes as well. We actually had one last Tuesday because it was World Toilet Day, and it was specifically just about only flushing the 3 Ps and not wipes as well. We also have developed signs and ads such as those that you see here, which you can print and distribute or hang within different facilities. Some of these we are going to be providing to groups like restaurants and apartment complexes so they can hang them up there. They do make great posters and they also make great ads. So if you're interested in receiving digital copies of these, you can email us at protectourpipes@houstontx.gov, and you can request digital copies of these, and we're happy to send those to you to share. We also have developed language and graphics for blog posts and articles such as those that you see here. We really tailored these based off of commonly searched items so that we could get the message out through quick Google searches. If you are interested in posting a blog post around this campaign on your blog, we are happy to work with you to get that content and these graphics to you to create a collaboration or partnership around these posts. And of course, we have giveaways such as those that you see here. While we are limited in how much we can hand these out in person at the moment, we have been hosting some giveaways through some of our partners and influencers. I'll discuss that a little bit more in a few minutes, but it's just a way to get some of these cool items out to newer audiences that we haven't really reached before. We also, when we're able to meet in person and go to some different events, we have a cornhole game where you're throwing the 3 Ps in the toilet and you're throwing your fats, oils, and grease in the trash to make it a little bit more interactive and fun. Just for the sake of time, I'm not going to play this 45-second video, but we do have several videos on YouTube. They're also on our website, protectourpipes.org, and they're a great way to share this information. We're also developing 2 new tutorial videos that go more into depth on how to actually dispose of this grease and provide a little bit more tips and information. So that's the campaign overview itself. I'm quickly going to go over our launch plan to date and some of what we have planned for the future. So when we launched this campaign, we really focused on 4 different areas, each of which I'll be going through now. So our first focus area was outreach to City of Houston staff specifically. We have a great resource in over 4,000 Houston Public Works employees and over 20,000 City of Houston employees. And this is a large, diverse demographic of low-hanging fruit for us, so to speak. So we really wanted to focus on creating spokespeople and advocates within our coworkers themselves. So we've done this through, we've shared this information through internal newsletters, digital and print signages in our office buildings, and we have plans to give out some of our giveaways to some of our staff as well. We are also lucky in that the City of Houston does have a lot of powerful community-facing platforms that we wanted to utilize as well. So these include social media, our water bill inserts. These are both through email as well as through paper bills. We're handing out information about Protect Our Pipes. Providing a little 5-minute presentation at different City of Houston events, and then also through community newsletters. For those of you who get the Houston Complete Communities newsletter, for example, Protect Our Pipes was featured in their November newsletter, which just went out today. We also rely on our partnership with the Houston Health Department to assist with outreach to apartment complexes and outreach as they're out there investigating sewer overflows that are occurring in these areas. Next, our next main focus really was relying on partnerships and community partners. We very, very much rely on these partners, such as many of you in the room here today. Reaching Houston's 2+ million population is a large reach that we cannot accomplish on our own. So many of you have likely received an email from me announcing the campaign with some links to some of our resources that you can use to further share this campaign. I want to say thank you to everybody that has shared these to date. It's been very exciting to see our partners really promoting this within their own communities as well. And it actually has significantly reflected in our webpage views and traffic. So my next question is, are there any groups that you can think of within our community that you think would be good for us to partner? And if you can think of any, please just put their name. If you have a contact information, I'd be glad for that in the chat. And any ideas you have on how we might partner with them. And then our fourth focus was more around mass media and influencers. So we have radio ads playing throughout the holiday season on Sunny 99.1, 93.7 The Beat, and then Mega 101.1. We also have TV billboard ads on ABC 13 that are just playing throughout the different news cycles and features that they have going on there. We've also partnered with influencers such as Houston's Mom's Blog, Edible Houston, and Houstonia Magazine, who have shared and promoted articles about the campaign as well. And we've seen a decent amount of success around that. Houstonia Magazine even did a giveaway on their Instagram story where we sent them a lot of our campaign giveaways, and they shared that on their story and said, you know, if you email protectourpipes@houstontx.gov with this code, you can get free giveaways too. So if that's something that you're interested in, promoting that kind of giveaway to your audience, again, I'll have my contact information at the end, but you can email us at protectourpipes@houstontx.gov, and we can work on some kind of partnership around that as well. And my poll question here is, are there any other local publications or influencers that you know of in the Houston area for us to consider partnering with as well? And I also just wanted to take us back to the protectourpipes.org website. At the bottom of the webpage, there's a take action section where you can actually download graphic copies of a lot of our flyers, signs, FAQs, and those types of resources. So I very much encourage you to go there for more ways to get involved. And then my last poll question is, how can we best support you to share campaign items with your friends, family, and community? And then really quickly, our next steps, I mentioned earlier, we're creating some new vehicles. We're also designing some vehicle wraps to go on Houston Public Works vehicles, especially those that are responding to sewer overflows. We're looking into creating a mini mural within the city of Houston. And really over the next couple of months, once we've gotten this out to the masses, we really want to do some more targeted outreach in SSO hotspots, so to say, and really focus on those areas where we're seeing the biggest problem, and then evaluating different outreach strategies and communication strategies related to that. And if you have any other recommended next steps, we do have our short and midterm plans kind of laid out, but we're always looking for recommendations to improve upon what we are doing. And with that, I know it's a quick overview, but I want to thank you very much for your time. We're very excited to continue to share this campaign throughout the community. And I'm happy to take any questions now if anybody has any.
Is that email address, is that houstontex.gov?
Yes, sorry. I just realized I changed the color of it and I missed the last part. Yes, it's houstontx.gov.
Thanks.
Thank you for catching that. All right, well, if there are no questions, Stephen, I will turn it back over to you, and thank you all very much.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. I know we saw some great stuff in the chat in terms of groups already making use of your campaign program. Next up, it's Kendall Guterres with H-GAC.
Right. Everybody hear me and see the presentation?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Good afternoon, everyone. Like Stephen said, I'm going to tell you just a little bit about H-GAC's current targeted bacteria monitoring project that we have started work on in partnership with the Bayou Preservation Association. So this targeted monitoring project is similar to previous top 5, least 5 monitoring projects that H-GAC has worked on that you might be familiar with. The project is funded by the Galveston Bay Estuary Program and HGAC is subcontracting with Biopreservation Association. They'll actually be providing the bacteria sampling and analysis. To help do that, Biopreservation is actually contracting with the Student Conservation Association to provide 2 separate 8-week-long internships, each with 2 interns who will do the actual field work and analysis. The current interns are Avery Patton and Chelsea Veloso, and they've actually been working on the project since the final week in October. And they're actually here too, so if there's any specific questions, they might be able to answer at the end of this presentation as well. As in the previous top 5, least 5 projects, we're looking at streams with some of the highest bacteria levels in the Houston area. We're looking at 3 to 6 AUs from the BIG's top 10 most wanted list, and those will be monitored with samples taken at outfalls that have dry weather flows, as well as any tributaries, and try and track bacteria sources. The interns and Biopreservation Association will be able to both take the samples and analyze them for E. coli levels using the ColiScan, Easy, and the Texas Stream Team protocols for E. coli monitoring. Any potential sources that we identify through this project will be reported to the appropriate jurisdiction, whether that's the City of Houston or otherwise, and more monitoring will follow any corrective actions so that we can determine if there was an impact on bacteria levels at that or on that AU. The 6 AUs that we are focusing on for this project are listed on the screen. Those were prioritized based on their relative bacteria geometric means from the big reports. And since interns and Biopreservation will be doing the monitoring, we also looked at their proximity to Biopreservation's office and their overall length so that we could determine which would be the most feasible to complete during the internship periods. One of the 6, as you'll notice, is just outside of the top 10, but many of the other AUs in the top 10 list are actually being monitored as part of the other project that Stephen mentioned Jesse will talk about next. Originally, we had planned to focus on the 4 AUs that have the arrows pointing to them so that we would have time to do follow-up monitoring in the second internship. I'll talk about what's changed in just a second. But this is a map of the 6 AUs we've prioritized just to give you a better idea of where they are geographically located. And as I mentioned, our original plan was to focus on those 4 AUs during the first internship and try to complete at least one. However, we have run into an issue that has delayed sampling. While Chelsea and Avery have completed surveys of all 6 AUs that we prioritized, they've walked them and noted potential sampling points, and they've even reported 2 potential areas to the City of Houston. When attempting to analyze samples that they took from the AUs, they found that the ColiScan Easy Gel was actually faulty and did not provide the coloration to the bacteria colonies that we needed to determine the E. coli counts. This was actually a production error on the part of the manufacturer for both of the batches that we ordered, and we're still waiting on the manufacturer to fix that before we can complete sampling. The pictures on the screen are actually from the 2 instances that Chelsea and Avery reported to the City of Houston. The one on the left was taken from a unnamed tribute to Buffalo Bayou. I believe when they investigated that, they found it to be related to a fog incident. And the one on the right is an overflowing manhole cover found near Plum Creek. They had a pungent smell and they were to track it down, and this was last week, so we don't have an update on that one yet. Even though we have not yet started sampling for the E. coli levels, they've still done quite a bit of work with those windshield surveys. If you would like to help with this project, and you're familiar with any of the prioritized AUs, we would appreciate any information you might have on any potential sources. And we'd also appreciate it if you would be willing to be a contact for potential questions about the AU that might come up while we're investigating. That's all we have project so far. But if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them. And I know Sarah and I think Sarah Bernhardt with Fire Preservation and Chelsea Avery, I think, are also on the call.
All right, I think we have a couple of things in the chat for you, Kendall, if you look at those to follow up with on, and we'll quickly move to Jesse's presentation. But thank you, Kendall. We will be bringing you back, or BPA, or both, back to the big in the future to report on your project. And next up is Jesse Casillas.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm hoping that you can also see my slide and hear me okay. If somebody can confirm, Stephen.
Yes, you're coming in clear and your presentation is available.
Okay, so my name is Jesse Casillas and I'm a planner with H-GAC. Today, I'm going to quickly present a new project that our water resources team is working towards. This project, again, as Kendall already mentioned, is very similar, or maybe very familiar to many of you, as it is also modeled after the BIG's Top 5 Least 5 project that was conducted back in 2017. Similar to that project, our team and its partners will be investigating several catchment areas in various environments in order to identify bacteria sources. So as seen from the map, there are several waterways that are deemed as impaired for bacteria within the BIG, and also on the areas outside of the BIG boundary. And they're considered to be, many of these are considered to be on a deteriorating path. So those are the red lines that you see coming up on this map. There are some improvement areas indicated as these yellow lines here, but I'm sure we'd all like to see additional improvements to be made. So the goal of this project is going to be to identify bacteria sources in various environments, such as within an urban, a suburban, and a rural setting. We then want to report these findings to the appropriate local authorities for problem elimination. And for this project, our goal is to investigate 4 urban areas, 4 suburban areas, and 2 rural areas. So in order to monitor the progress, the project has been split into 3 phases. Phase 1 contains the initial data analysis component, where we first identified all impaired assessment units in our Clean Rivers program basins. And within this phase, a prioritized list was drafted and presented to a work group where additional priorities were then evaluated and discussed. During phase 2, H-GAC, along with its partners, plan to conduct windshield surveys, very similar to Kendall's project, where we will be doing surveys throughout the entire catchment area. Then ultimately conduct on-the-ground intensive monitoring on the waterway itself. Once project results are determined, phase 3 will contain a fully documented report of all findings. So far, H-GAC has completed phase 1 of the project. The initial analysis was conducted in late 2019 to determine those assessment units and its stations with the highest bacterial contaminations. The analysis provided us a list of waterways that were prioritized based upon the geometric mean calculated for the most 7-year period, and then compared with the state water quality standards for contact recreation. The list was then broken down into categories where we evaluated how many times that the geometric mean exceeded the state standard. Additionally, this list was then further categorized as whether its catchment area was lying within one of those three types of settings, that's urban, suburban, or rural. And then based upon recommendations from the work group regarding either accessibility or just feasibility, the following list was prioritized. So this table shows the 10 selected AUs for the project. Top 4 are going to be within the urban environment. Middle 4 are the suburban environment. And then the last 2 are the selected waterways for the rural type of environment. It was a little tricky to assess suburban and rural settings, but ultimately we used the percent impervious surface in order to make the selection. We then compared those against each other. So in this map, you can see that the project's 10 assessment units they're quite expansive. The urban waterways lie within the outer loop. The suburban waterways, there's one up north in Conroe, White Oak Creek, and then going further down south, we have Mustang Bayou, which is near Alvin. Robinson Bayou, and then an unnamed tributary of Gum Bayou are located near League City. And then the rural waterways are kind of in the middle of Alvin and League City. Those are Dickinson Bayou and Cedar Creek. Okay, so we're currently beginning phase 2 of the project. The phase contains an intensive desktop review of all these waterways and their catchment areas. The review includes all known permitted wastewater treatment facility outfalls, permitted on-site sewage facility systems, and where applicable, stormwater and wastewater infrastructure. Next, H-GAC and partners will conduct a windshield survey. Field crew will drive through the watershed looking for any potential sources of bacteria. And this can be anything from ornamental ponds, nurseries, and any signs of sewer overflows. And then if there's anything else that needs to be documented, that will be done as well. So during these surveys, crews will also be sampling at major crossroads. So the map that you see on the right is an example from White Oak Creek and Conroe. The green circles indicate that there are 3 primary road crossings in the catchment area and 1 TCEQ monitoring station on the south end of the waterway. The results of the phase 2 monitoring will indicate where on-the-ground intensive monitoring will begin. The monitoring will be conducted during dry weather, and then it'll also contain unpermitted flows, and we will be taking ambient water samples upstream and downstream, along with any incoming tributaries. And then the bacteria samples are going to be analyzed at one of the NELAP approved labs. Okay, and then lastly, during phase 3, findings are going to be reported to local authorities. Recommendations will be provided to the BIG and possibly any other implementation plans. We will work with appropriate jurisdictions in order to implement bacteria reduction measures. And then lastly, we hope to conduct follow-up monitoring and bacteria analysis to determine the success of the project. So due to this year's events, the project was delayed. However, I am happy to report that we received TCEQ approval in late October. So with the project being approved, we're now finalizing contracts with our lab. Meanwhile, H-GAC has identified partnerships with the San Jacinto River Authority for monitoring the assessment unit in Conroe. And then field crew from H-GAC and Estuary will be completing that full investigation. The University of Houston Clear Lake, their Environmental Institute of Houston, will be conducting investigations for the 9 remaining waterways, as they're highly equipped for various types of environments, and they also have a higher capacity of field crew. All right, so to wrap up this presentation, thanks goes to our work group for their input. And if the audience has any questions, please feel free to contact me. My information is on this slide. I know we're out of time, but if there are any quick questions that could possibly be answered. But as always, please feel free to contact me if you have any questions about the project. That's all.
Any questions for Jesse? All right. Let's thank Jesse and Kendall and Sarah for presenting today. I look forward to hearing the results of these projects, as well as seeing the Protect Our Pipes campaign reach its intended audience. So let's get the sharing and we're almost done. I want to thank you all for sticking with us as we work towards finishing up this day's meeting and moving on to the last few little items. Other business, as we typically do this if we have time remaining, and we don't. So if there are other business items or things that you wish me to convey to other members of the BIG, please let me know. Typically we use this period to also update any meeting announcements. Is there any meeting announcement that's pressing that you really need to get out to the group? Please shout it out now. Do want to remind you of the next meeting of the BIG. The next spring meeting will be May 25th, 2021. Hopefully we will be able to do this one in person, as I certainly am missing all of your bright and shiny faces. It certainly makes the meeting a little more interesting than seeing my mug on the video screen for 2 hours. If there is nothing else, then I will let us all adjourn today. I do want to thank the TCEQ TMDL program for its continued support of the BIG and for BIG implementation. And I look forward to talking with you all again as we move the implementation plan revision forward. If there's nothing else, then I wish to thank you all for attending today. Y'all have a great day today.
Thank you.
Good day.
Thanks, Stephen.
You're welcome. Thank you.